We are less than 2 years away from entering a 15-year-long AI-fueled dystopia. It should really hit about 2027. So says Mo Gawdat, who used to be the chief business officer at Google X, their special projects division. Dario Amodei, the CEO of AI company Anthropic, he told Axios recently that 50% of white-collar jobs will be wiped out. And it's not just tech bros. Ford CEO Jim Farley, he recently stated artificial intelligence is going to replace literally half of all white-collar workers in the US. We could go on like this. There is no lack of such quotes. The hundreds of billions of dollars being spent on AI, they don't get raised without some claims that the world stands on the cusp of transformation. Now, I suspect, this is not gospel preaching, this is just me setting the social context for this sermon, that those predictions are a little overeager. Presently, AI feels like at least one theoretical step away from doing any of this. But AI can already do a lot of things, particularly if you know how to use it. At the Belize dinner on Friday night, I spoke with several church members who are using it in their own jobs. It's increasing their productivity, changing the way they work, doing things that would have taken them hours. I see it in my own work, and not just for silly illustrations in the sermon series. Most usefully to me personally, I have coded some scripts that automate some of the hateful administrative parts of my job. But there's this one time I used AI at work that really did crystallize something about what is going on for me. Some of you may remember this actually. Right before Christmas last year, we sent out an edition of The Net, which is our weekly email newsletter. If you don't get it, write it on your connection card. We'll take care of that. We sent out an edition of The Net, and in place of my letter, we put The Net Before Christmas, which started like this. It said, "'Twas the net before Christmas, and all on your phone. The emails are flooding, new sales being shown. The subjects are loud and emoji are there in hopes that you'll buy just one of their wares. This email is different. It comes from your priest, who wants you to come to the Christmas Eve feast." And from there, it went on to explain our 3 services on Christmas Eve and the differences among them, all in the style and kind of rhythm of the night before Christmas. I received more feedback about that edition of The Net than I think anything I've ever put in The Net. And by all accounts, it was delightful. Now, that email did come from your priest, but your priest pays for a Google Gemini subscription. And I had to have the idea and write out the prompt, and I changed a couple lines at the end, but mostly, that was what Gemini sent back. I spent maybe 20 minutes on it total. 5 years ago, if I had that idea, it doesn't happen. There's no way. It's the week before Christmas. Now, I could do it. I am perfectly capable of writing a bad poem in imitation of a good poem, but it would have been too many hours of intellectual labor for me to spend the week of Christmas especially. It'd be like bad stewardship of my brain. Like, my intellectual labor is too expensive the way like a fancy coffee shop is too expensive. My intellectual labor is bespoke. It's artisanal intellectual labor. But then I realized I had a can of Folgers that I could just throw at that problem. And sure enough, it came back. Cheap intellectual labor to spend on the idea. And this, I believe, is the core promise of AI. And to an extent, the reality of it already. That intellectual labor, at least some sorts of it, is going to become vastly cheaper. Bill Gates explained it on Jimmy Fallon like this.
The era that we're just starting is that intelligence is rare. A great doctor, a great teacher. And with AI, over the next decade, that will become free, commonplace. Great medical advice, great tutoring. And it's kind of profound because it solves all these specific problems, like we don't have enough doctors or mental health professionals.
Now, this idea that AI is going to become free or commonplace, or at least very cheap, right? This is seen very clearly in schools. And I think it's part of why AI use is so prevalent there. But the model of a school works very well to illustrate this. Provided one listened in class, doing a math problem, doing the homework of a math problem, simply requires a certain amount of intellectual labor. Right? An essay in history class requires more units of intellectual labor, usually than a math problem, but it works basically the same way. And for most of us, when we were in school, the only tool we had that produced intellectual labor was our brains. Now, sometimes we'd have to use our friends' brains. We'd have to combine brains to get more horsepower, right? But today's students all know that they have another tool that produces intellectual labor, especially the sort that solves algebra questions and writes essays. AI. And they are tempted completely reasonably. Right? They're looking up at the ground floor, looking at high school like a skyscraper, and there's clearly an elevator, and we are telling them to take the stairs. And we're like, it's good for you. You really should take the stairs. And they're like, what? Now, we're telling them because we know that at the top of the skyscraper is real life. And ChatGPT is not as good at real life as it is at school. And if you have steadfastly refused to learn the school things, real life will go poorly for you, we believe. Essentially, to get a good education helps to get a good job, and to get a good job helps you get a good life. Good education goes to good job, goes to good life. And what we are encountering with all the fear around AI is the dawning recognition that the first 2/3 of this may not be a law of human existence, but instead simply be a description of the way our economy has worked for the last 150 years. Now, if you're not worried about AI at all, I promise you the sermon series is over after today. Also, I promise you that there's not a parent in this room that does not wonder about what AI is going to do to the first piece of that equation. And I doubt there are many people who are more than 3 to 5 years away from retirement who are not wondering about the middle piece of the equation as well. We probably do not speak often enough in the church about what we as Christians believe about education and work. And in our culture, education and work are deeply tied to one another. Yet work and religion have always been connected. They're connected literally from the creation story. The first stories in the Bible, we read one of them today. They're about God working. God forming man, planting a garden, making the trees, forming the animals, forming the birds. And then the man and the woman, they go and they work and they till the garden. Now, something changes after they sinned and they eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The nature of their work changed. It became hard. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground. This was more or less an accurate description of human life until the Industrial Revolution. There were exceptions, but almost everyone farmed, and through painful toil, got food from the ground. Large cities were comparatively very rare. Education was largely, in some cases almost entirely, the pursuit of the wealthy and the ruling classes who had leisure. The average person depended on the sweat of their brow and the strength of their muscles. All but 2 or 3 of us in here would have been farmers. And a good education did not improve one's life the way working in the field an extra hour would have. For almost everybody, just work meant muscles. And this is the notion of work with which the Bible deals. When the psalmist prayed, prosper the work of our hands, he meant physical labor, not excel. Now, the Industrial Revolution changed this. Suddenly, machines could do physical labor. And in some cases, they could do it much faster and much more effectively than human beings. Way better. And so much human physical labor was replaced. And today, big muscles are largely a fashion accessory for men. says the guy who can't grow them. But this whole Industrial Revolution thing, not coincidentally to my earlier point on education, gave rise to the public education movement. There was less need socially for muscles and more need for brains. And so as a society, we shifted to making brains. Physical labor was replaced by intellectual labor. And so you get farmers going to school and become insurance brokers and car salesmen and IT buyers and nurses and data analysts.
Hello there. How can I help you today?
And all those IT people produce that thing eventually. Now, the question we're kind of trying to come to grips with is if the AI revolution does for brains what the Industrial Revolution did to muscles, then what? If we have less need for muscles and less need for brains, like at this point, if all you have for an anthropology of a way of thinking about what a human being is materialism, if you believe we are just muscles and brains, then we're in trouble. Right? If we are just bodies, the mind being a part of the body, of course, right? If we're just bodies, we don't need humans. And here is someone who is at least honest about it.
Will we still need humans?
Not for most things.
That is such a bleak thought. I'm going to play it again, just so you can hear it again.
Will we still need humans?
Not for most things.
Will we still need humans? No. Now, if you watch the rest of this clip, Bill Gates softens it a little bit. He suggests baseball may be a place where we still want humans. So we have baseball. I do at least respect Gates's logical clarity. Sam Altman has been similarly clear. He suggests that the best case we can hope for is that somehow we merge with AI, merge with the machine. But our leading materialists are logically preparing us for extinction. If we are nothing but brains and muscles, and if we are successful at building better brains and bigger muscles, then we are no longer needed. But we're not just brains and muscles. We are more than bodies. Christian anthropology, the Christian understanding of the human, says that there is another thing, the soul, a spirit, something that is united to the mind and to the body, but is not the same as either of them. We are embodied souls, or if you will, we are ensouled bodies. Either way, but you are more than just body. The ancient words for the soul suggest it's the animating principle, the root of life, the kind of like breath of life that God gives Adam in this story that we read. The saints of the church write of the soul in terms of our deepest longings and desires, which ultimately lead us to love and ultimately to eternity and to God. Now, unfortunately, we've spent the last several decades as a society turning the care of our souls over to social media algorithms run by for-profit companies and radically shrinking the amount of time and quality of human in-person relationships that nourish the souls. It would be like human beings going into the Industrial Revolution right after they lobotomized each other with ice picks. They were all idiots. We're not exactly equipped for this right now, to fight a revolution that depends on our souls. And yet here we are. The Industrial Revolution made our brains far more important because even the strongest machines didn't have brains. And the AI revolution will make our souls far more important because even the strongest and the smartest machines won't have souls. And I hope, faith will become more important in this age rather than less, because faith is about our souls, about our deepest desires and longings and hopes for life and for wholeness and for holiness and for love. So in a way, I guess I'm hopeful about AI, that handing over much of the sort of rote intellectual labor that makes up so much of our lives will leave us space to do more of the work that Jesus was talking about when he said, "The one who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and in fact, will do greater works than these." None of us think the greater works he was talking about were expense reports and PowerPoints and AT&T fiber contracts, which is how I spend a good chunk of my week. Like, Jesus was not a productivity guru. It wasn't like, how much can you get done? Let me show you some tips and tricks to get things done. Jesus meant the sort of works that he did, where sins are forgiven, where people are washed anew in grace, the healings and the hopings that just sprung up in his wake as he traveled across Galilee and Judea. The works of the soul, the works that there will still be plenty of to do in this world, regardless of how many jobs AI takes over. Now, perhaps we will discover that we do not, 20 years from now, any longer need to train human beings who will one day do data entry and manipulation in Excel. And this might change how we think about education. But we do need to train humans to be good humans. In reading literature, writing about history, appreciating and making art, encountering the beauty and symmetry of the math that underlies the universe, these are not just intellectual pursuits, they are soul-shaping endeavors. We knew in this age we've all grown up in, when intelligence was a rare and special good locked up in our heads, that those heads still needed bodily exercise. So everyone got to go to PE class. And when intelligence is much less rare, and souls are the rare commodity that we as humans possess, the brains with those souls will still need to be formed. We'll still need sunsets and sonnets and symbolic logic. St. Augustine said, "Take care of your body as if you were going to live forever, and take care of your soul as if you're going to die tomorrow." The nature of our professional work is surely going to change, whatever happens with AI. If you are young right now, you are going to live in a world that none of us have ever seen before. We don't know what it will be like, except that if the world is indeed swimming in intelligence, then your soul will all the more clearly be the most precious, most human quality you have. Take care of it. Pray and worship and wonder and love. At church, this means we are comfortable using AI as cheap intellectual labor for things that do not depend on souls, like telling you what time the Christmas services are. But you will not ever come to church and sing this great worship hymn based on my sermon series produced by
In the
AI.
hum of the wires, in the glow of the screen, we're searching for wisdom in things we have dreamed. But no code we can write, no machine we design can quiet the ache of this heart deep inside. You alone can save. Jesus, you remain. Every age, every name, still the same, still the same. You alone can save.
Look, I wish it was worse. But we're still not going to sing it. Because that song was written and performed by a machine that has no longing, no soul, no desire for love or connection, no need for grace or forgiveness, no need for Jesus to save. Like, I'd rather sing a bad song that Tim wrote than a good song that AI wrote, because Tim needs Jesus. Better a sermon with a soul than a speech with AI. Because the moment the church stops working with souls, we've given up the whole game. The God part, the deepest longings, the wellspring of life, we can't let go of that. A lot of people in the next decades are likely to have their intellectual output replaced by what AI can produce in a fraction of the time for a fraction of the cost. And as followers of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we must be able to tell them, that's hard. We're sorry. But you have something of great value, of infinite value, that no AI ever will. A soul that God loves, that Jesus came to save, and that can work the works of the Lord. Amen.